It's great to be here. That's quite an impressive introduction. I appreciate that. It's really sort of a pleasure and an honor to be here presenting to the community that I learned so much from. It's really kind of a highlight in my so far short career. So I'm Matthew Romaine. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Kwanzaa. So since we're doing a language-related startup, I usually like to start my presentations with sort of a word of the day. And so today I chose omotenashi, which maybe some of you have heard. When Japan was bidding for the 2020 Olympics, this word was mentioned a number of times, and it basically means a spirit of selfless hospitality. And so if you've been to Japan, maybe some of you experienced the really rich service culture that's there. Can you raise your hand if you've visited or been to Japan before? Wow, awesome. Okay, cool. Oh, hey, Kenji. See some familiar faces. So when Dr. Dasher asked me to speak today, he asked me a number of interesting questions that he wanted me to cover. So I'm going to try my best to try and cover these throughout the presentation. But before I get into the details of Gengo, I think it's kind of important to understand sort of my background and where I came from. And so just indulge me a little bit as I share a little bit about my sort of upbringing. So I'm actually half Japanese, half American. I was born in Boston, but I grew up in Japan. And as you heard a little earlier, I studied computer science and music theory at Brown, and here at Stanford was more focused on the music side, which led to an opportunity at Sony where I did a lot of audio research and in a research group there and sort of mixing internet audio streaming. And just out of curiosity, does anyone want to take a guess how much my first paycheck was for the first month I was in Sony? So this is a Stanford master's student making, anyone want to guess?
$2,000.
Very close, $2,500 a month. So it seems kind of low, but of course it came with a lot of benefits. There was subsidized housing, there was transportation was covered, and Japan is one of the best healthcare infrastructures in the world, and so that was sort of the beginning. And I kind of rationalized moving back to Japan for a couple reasons. One was I wanted to sort of get back to my roots and be with my family that was out there. I wanted to experience working in a Japanese company, which I figured I'd rather do earlier on when the pay was not as important as the experience. So, and I figured I'd be there for a couple of years and probably come back to the US. So despite being a global company, the housing wasn't so global. So this is my room, kind of small. In fact, the bathroom was so small when I sat on the toilet, I couldn't close the door because my legs were so long. So I stayed there for a couple months and ended up moving to a slightly larger apartment. But the opportunities and the experience that Sony provided were really fantastic. And even though I was hired as an engineer, this was for a full-time sort of seishain opportunity. And so the expectation by the company was that I'd be there for a long time. And so they invested a lot in their employees. And one of the interesting opportunities I had was working on the retail floor, doing sales for a month. And this is called Hanbai Kenshu. So sales training, where I was selling digital video cameras, digital cameras, and other electronics. So kind of a rich experience. And during this time, I also came across Joi Ito's blogs. Maybe some of you have heard of his name before. He's currently the MIT Media Lab director, but at the time, he's also known for, I think, launching one of Japan's first ISPs. And I started to notice some similarities. Of course, he's a bit older, but he was a Japanese who grew up in North America. I was an American who grew up in Japan. At the age of 14, we both moved back to our home country and finished off high school. So I went to boarding school in the US. We were both interested in music and technology. And so I kind of looked up to him and wanted to learn more about him, and eventually had an opportunity to meet him on a panel and invited him to speak at Sony on sort of internet trends and technologies. So Richard mentioned that Howard Stringer became CEO towards the end of my stint at Sony, and so I moved to a different division there. But during the latter half of my time at Sony, there were a couple interesting things happening. So in 2004, Facebook and Gree launched, and Google IPO'd. In 2005, Odesk and Amazon's Mechanical Turk also launched. And then in 2006, Twitter launches and Mixi IPOs. And Mixi is one of Japan's larger sort of social network services. So all this is kind of happening. And I'm thinking, I started to sort of get the itch, the bug, and I want to try to experience and maybe potentially launch my own service. And so I left and decided to improve my sort of web development knowledge and started Majides, which is kind of if you know Japanese, kind of an odd company name. When you pick up the phone, yes, it's for real. It's basically what it means. And so this was kind of an umbrella company where I launched a couple projects. And one of them was, in the upper left, you see Kirakirajin. It's kind of this idea of bringing Hot or Not to Japan. That didn't work out so well. Around 2007, I guess late 2006, Nintendo launches their Wii console. And so I launched a service called Mi Station. And this was sort of the avatar creation. So if you've played with the Wii before, there's the Mi channel where you can make your own caricature. And so this was a service where you upload a photo of yourself, and we'd sit in front of the TV and make the avatar character for you, and then send it to your Wii console. And it got some publicity and some PR, managed to get in the Wall Street Journal, which was kind of cool. But the problem was it was not very scalable. We couldn't reverse engineer this. And so the more orders we got, the more we were sitting in front of a TV trying to make these caricatures of other people. And so another service I launched is this Nikurabe, where focusing more on the scalability and getting people to contribute to the platform by creating their own sort of A/B polling sort of service. And during this time, of course, I'm doing some client work on the side. That's what actually paid the bills. And the English-speaking community in Tokyo is pretty small. And so I eventually met my co-founder, Rob, who had moved back to Japan a couple months before I'd met him. And his wife is Japanese. He'd met her in London. And so as he was trying to navigate Tokyo, he kept asking his wife to translate content so he could read news and blog posts and whatnot. And so as we started working on a couple projects together, he's got a design background and I've got the systems background, so it was a good pairing. I hear this frustration that he has around translation, and I immediately recalled when I was back at Sony, towards the end of my stint there, even though I was hired as an engineer, I was regularly asked to translate a lot of content for my colleagues. And this was either emails, email correspondence, articles that they wanted to understand better, even internal documentation, which seemed kind of odd to me at the time, that they would be asking, just because I was bilingual, that they would be asking me to translate. So we eventually launched Gengo. So I'm going to explain a bit about the business, and then I'll get into sort of the fundraising and all that we also went through. So basically, it's a human translation platform where we crowdsource individuals from around the world. And because of the infrastructure that we've built, we're able to provide translation at a significant cost savings to sort of the traditional industry. And we believe it's about a $33 billion market and growing. The part of the market that is most applicable for us is a portion of that, but we believe it's growing because a lot of this content did not even exist 8 to 10 years ago because of Facebook and Twitter and large e-commerce platforms that are growing. So some of our clients include TripAdvisor, so we do a lot of the hotel reviews, Rakuten, which is Japan's largest e-commerce platform, and YouTube, the captions on the videos for them. So we're predominantly in 2 locations, Tokyo, where our largest team is, in San Mateo, where I just came from this morning, and we've done about close to $19 million in funding. So when we first started, it was a real simple order form, and this is all we had. Copy and paste and upload some text, upload a file. You immediately get a quote. If you're translating from English or sort of word-based languages, then we just calculate how many words in the document and we charge per word. If you're translating from Chinese or Japanese or other character-based languages, then we just calculate the number of characters. And then you just pay on the spot and you wait for the translation to come back. So real simple process, kind of made translations more of a transaction-based interaction. And as we looked at the content coming into the system, we noticed, in particular, there were a lot of user reviews, a lot of restaurant listings, a lot of hotel reviews, a lot of short-form content, basically, a lot of user-generated content. And sure enough, if you look at the spread, more than half of the type of content we do is under 500 words. So we noticed that it turns out an API integration is really something that makes sense for platforms that have this high volume of short-form content. And so an API allows sort of integrations of systems to simplify the flow and ordering of translation. And so after we launched the order form, we noticed this trend in the type of content. We sort of rejiggered it and turned it into an API to allow other platforms to integrate. And we now have a couple examples. These are some of the highlights. And so Pixta on the left is a sort of like a Japanese version of Shutterstock. So Shutterstock is a US-listed multi-billion-dollar company where they just sell photos. It's like a photo library, and you've got titles and labels and photo descriptions. And so we helped translate a lot of those. And Pixta wanted to go global pretty early on. And so we helped translate a lot of this content into English and simplified Chinese, complex Chinese. Vestiaire is an interesting startup out of France. And they are a platform that helps resell used luxury clothing. So you've got your expensive jacket or your shoes you don't want to wear anymore, still a high value item. And so the seller types the description in French and puts it in a package and sends it off to the Paris office. And I had an opportunity to go visit. They've got this 7-step process where they validate and check that it's not a fake and make sure it's clean and all that. And if it's all good, then they package it and they flip a switch, and that turns the item on for sale. And that triggers, in their system, the sending of the original French description through the API to our platform. And our translators will grab the text and translate it into English. And then when they click submit, it gets sent back to the Vestiaire system, and now it's available for the English-speaking community to buy as well. And so creates a lot more liquidity for Vestiaire. And the sellers are happy, a larger audience, the customers are happy, they have access to more products. And then we also have a YouTube integration where if you upload a video with captions, you'll see sort of a button that says translate this, and then you choose your target languages, and those get sent through the API. Our translators look at the video and they translate the captions, and when they're done, they click submit and it gets sent back to YouTube, and now the video is available with captions in other languages as well. So the cool thing about having an API integration, though, is we can handle the sort of the volatility of the content as it comes in. So on average, for example, the Vestiaire integration, they're doing about 400 to 500 jobs a day. But at peak times, so maybe some kind of holiday or something, they would send over 1,000 of these descriptions, which a traditional translation agency would not be able to handle that sort of flow. So how do we actually manage the translators? This is really core to our platform. And it starts with an internal team we call TOPS, or the Translator Operations Team. It's about 4 individuals, and they are tasked with, for each language pair that we support, hiring a senior translator. And that senior translator is responsible for their language pair, and they create tests, they evaluate the tests, and they are sort of like a moderator for the language pair. And as we advertise on a platform like Facebook for individuals who are bilingual, who are interested in working on Gengo, we've managed to get about 10,000 translators who have passed and qualified to become a Gengo translator. Now the testing is pretty difficult. If you're bilingual yourself, you're welcome to give it a try. Don't get upset with me if you don't pass. But there's over 100,000 individuals who've tried. So less than 10% actually become a Gengo translator. It's pretty challenging. But it's really important for us to nurture this base of translators. And so we create a lot of materials for translators to sort of work and improve and work up the system. So Over 50% of the individuals of the translators on our platform are not professional translators. They're bilingual individuals. Some of them are, many of them are students. And so they're not as familiar with some of the translator tools, aspects around time management. They've never really worked freelance before, and so we create documentation for them to educate them under these topics. So you've got the art of revision, making text sound natural. Of course, language is a living thing, right? And so how do you translate new words, new terminology? How do you stay with pop culture, and how does that translate, pun intended, to another language, right? So this is really important for us. So once you become a translator, you get access to a dashboard. And on this dashboard is when the jobs come in. It's a first come, first served system. So you have to be pretty quick. But there's a lot of flexibility. You can choose which jobs you want to do. You can look at how long it's going to take. You can see how much content there is that you're going to have to translate, so you can sort of adjust with the available time that you have in the day. And we also try and be very transparent about how our system is evaluating the translators. And so I mentioned the senior translators. They have internal tools themselves for spot checking and evaluating the translation output from each of these translators. And before it goes back to a customer, a senior translator will check it and give it a score. And so we reveal sort of the translator's reputation in the system to each individual translator. So they can see their quality. And of course, speed is also really important. Most of our customers are trying to sell something online. They're trying to get out to an audience as quick as they can. And so the translators start to get accustomed to sort of balancing this quality versus speed. And there's sort of a nice equilibrium. So overseeing all of this is that TOPS team that I mentioned. And their focus is on sort of 3 pillars. There's speed, quality, and scale, and a number of parameters going to each one. And what we've done is created this sort of language pair health index, which is kind of like a GDP for a language pair. And so there's like all these parameters get put into some equation, and out comes a single number. And if that number gets below a certain threshold, then we know there's a problem for that language pair. And the TOPS team goes in and tries to figure out which of the parameters are actually impacting it in a negative way. And they try and fix that issue and bring the number above threshold again. So that's kind of a pretty cerebral or analytical way of how we manage the crowd. Of course, we're talking about humans. And one of the ways that we give them, each individual translator, a sort of more public face is we feature them on our blog. And so I just want to introduce a couple of the translators. So for example, we have Mohammed. He translates from English to Arabic. He's based in Egypt. And what's interesting about him is he's actually a chemist by day. He has a chemistry YouTube channel. But by night, he likes to do translation. And we've also got Arajiha. He's in Nigeria. And he has a German studies background, a degree in German studies. And so he translates from English to German. So for a bit more insight, we asked them to share with us sort of their work environment. And so here's Arajiha's sort of computing environment. Apparently he has rather unstable power grid, and so sometimes he has to go to the cafe. Here's the environment that Mohammed works in, and where he also records his chemistry YouTube channel. And so it's important for us to understand sort of the environments that these translators also work in, because it drives and directs our product development. Not everyone has a large screen. Some of them work on mobile. Not everyone has a desktop computer, and so there's different changes that we have to take into consideration. So to give you a sense of the volume that we're doing, on average we're doing about 2.5 million words a week. Now this fluctuates quite a bit. Sometimes we'll just do 1 million, sometimes we'll do over 5. And so the infrastructure that we've built allows us to handle this very volatile, these swings in the volume that comes in. We're doing about 248 words of translation per minute. Just for frame of reference, the fastest typer in the world can type at 216 words per minute. So it's pretty fast. A little over 10% of our translators are actually active in any given week. And we're currently doing about 56 language pairs. So we've been doubling in the volume of work that we've been translating per year, and we expect to do that again this year. It says here units. That's sort of our KPI, or the metric that we measure, that we really look at in detail to see how we're growing. And so I mentioned a unit is either a word or a character, depending on the source language. So we've been doubling since launch. So that's where we are now. And we've got about a little over 10,000 lay translators, we call them now. We're investing a lot in quality and technology. And we basically have two types of customers. We've got the web, so the individuals who go online. I'll show you a link towards the end. You can get some free credits and try out a translation if you'd like, order a translation for free. And we also have our API customers, or these sort of high volume integrations. But it took quite a bit to get here. And when we first started, for the first 8 months, I was sleeping on an inflatable mattress at home. And I didn't really know how these mattresses worked. And so for the first one I slept on, I would wake up every morning and I would be lying on the floor because all the air had escaped. And I just figured, well, that's how you wake up. It turns out there was a hole in their mattress, which I discovered a few months later. And to keep costs low, I kind of sold a bunch of my things I didn't really need. And since I wasn't really sure where this was going, I didn't really want to invest in sort of a new apartment and all this kind of stuff. And so I was fortunate to have sort of a space at my parents' place for a couple months. And this was kind of nice because I ended up saving money on my commute. So I would just walk to the office and back home. It was about 45 minutes, which was actually kind of good because it forced me to get some amount of exercise. Obviously, I'm sitting in front of the computer all day, and so having to walk home is not such a bad idea. Also gave me time to think and solve some problems in my head as I'm sort of walking back and forth. So we raised a small friends and family round and managed to move into, this is our first shared office. Just a cubicle and sort of a shared office space where there were a lot of artists and architects. I think we were one of the few internet groups doing some internet stuff. And as we were building the business and winding down the client work that we were doing, I started to think, should we be moving to the Bay Area? Should we, is this something that we can continue doing in Japan? And thought maybe we can try and bring a piece of Silicon Valley to Tokyo, thinking that this idea behind Silicon Valley is more a mindset versus like a physical, need or location. And so more of an attitude. And so we tried raising capital in Tokyo. We were introduced to a number of angel investors, both wealthy foreigners and Japanese in the area. And it was a challenge. We even pitched to Digital Garage, which was Joi Ito's investing firm. And they're known for bringing like LinkedIn and Twitter to Japan. And we even applied to some competitions that some companies were running with awards of about $100,000 of equivalent value. But for some odd reason, a lot of these competitions were behind closed doors. And so no one really knows who won or and whatnot. So it's kind of, this is back in 2008, 2009. So that's sort of the environment that we were in. And nothing really it was very difficult to raise. And so we started to sort of look outside of Japan. And back in 2006, when after I left Sony, I spent some time doing a bit of networking, trying to meet individuals to build up a client base. And I was introduced to Dave McClure, who's known for building up 500 startups. He's the VC there. And his wife is actually Japanese, and so he was coming to Japan on vacation. And we kind of kept in touch, and I shared with him the Mi Station and the Kira Kira Jin and the Nikurabe, these web services that I was building. And when we were working on Gengo, I kind of reached out to him and said, hey, we're working on this, what do you think? And it turns out he was going to be in Tokyo, and so we had an opportunity to pitch to him. And by the end of the pitch, he had opened up his laptop and he said, look, I'll make a small investment, but I want you to come out to the Bay Area and meet a bunch of individuals I'm going to introduce you to and try and close a seed round. And so we got really excited. And a month later, in January 2010, we flew out here, Rob and I. That's Dave in the middle. And over about 10 days, we did over 30 presentations. And so a lot of driving up and down. I was doing all the driving. Rob was working on the pitch deck and the passenger seat. And a very interesting and exciting period for us. And a few months later, we managed to close our seed round, in part through some nice PR and some visibility that we got. So we had some friends who were journalists in Japan, representing either foreign US-based media, such as TechCrunch, and also tapped into my network when I was at Sony, and managed to get some visibility in Japanese press as well. So after securing that first seed round, we moved into a larger office, and wanting to, again, sort of bring that piece of Silicon Valley to Tokyo, of course, had to get some bean bags. And we had company-colored bean bags, so blue and orange at the time. We went through rebranding, so our design sense is a little different now. And we were in this space for a couple years. But about a year after, in this same space, it turned into something like this. So we grew pretty quick. It got pretty packed in there. But very exciting. We're now in a slightly larger office. So just to get into the fundraising aspects, I sort of thought about the different fundraising stages that we went through and put together some observations. So our seed round, we went through 2 seed rounds. And the investors in those were either Japanese who were living or had lived overseas, or foreigners who were in Tokyo, or individuals with a very international background. And so the early seed round investors all sort of understood this challenge we were trying to solve around translation and the need with the sort of this international global connection. The Series A round was pretty challenging to raise. There was a lot of local interest, but most of the VCs in Japan were only really focused on Japan and couldn't think sort of outside of Japan for this stage of the fundraising. There was a lot of US interest, but there was already a lot of good deal flow around here, and so there was not, they weren't quite ready to take the plunge and invest outside of sort of their local area. But we were very fortunate to meet Atomico, the UK-based VC founded by Nicholas Stenstrom, one of the Skype co-founders. And they have a mission of having global investments. And so we really connected. They're also a very product-driven VC, and so as are the founders, Rob and I, very sort of really into the product. And so we connected, and they helped lead our Series A. Our Series B round, which we closed earlier last year, there are not so many Japanese VCs that have gone through this stage of investment, from my experience. And so our options were few. Again, there was good US interest, but there's the fact that we wanted to stay, Rob and I wanted to stay in Japan seemed to be a difficult sort of point to get over, partly also because it's difficult for the US VCs to exercise their network and their resources in a space that they may not have an office, for example. So, but we were very fortunate to raise from Intel. They obviously have a very large existing global footprint, and they saw us as an asset to their portfolio of other investments that they've made. So in addition to the challenges in the fundraising, the other biggest challenge that we've had has been in hiring. So this is a recent photo of our team, and about once every 7 or 8 months we bring everyone together. So we fly the US team over to Japan and get together and do sort of a mini conference we call Gengo conference. It's about a couple days, and in this photo there's about, I guess, 12, 13 different nationalities being represented. So a very diverse team in the Tokyo office and in the San Mateo office. But I think some of the challenges, sourcing. So when we first started, because there aren't so many startups, there are not very many individuals who have startup experience. And loyalty. So the challenge around loyalty, a lot of employees in the sort of Japanese employment environment are very loyal to their employer. And so it's hard to move them there's not a whole lot of mobility. And in the hires that we've done, we've basically learned to expect that it could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months before someone who has agreed to join us can actually move and join us. And that's pretty long, I think. And flexibility in the contracts. And so I mentioned this seishain concept. Japanese companies really investing in their employees. And there's this, it's very hard to sort of change your team structure. And as a startup, you need a lot of that flexibility. You might have to pivot, you need to try things out. Not everyone is the right sort of fit, depending on, sometimes it can take time to learn if it's the right kind of fit. And so we've sort of structured it where all of our contracts are fixed term, and that comes with a bit of a premium. We might have to change our compensation package a little bit. But those are some of the challenges that we've had to come to learn. But I think the environment's getting a lot better. So this is Skytree under construction. I haven't actually had a chance to go visit it yet, but it's supposed to be quite nice. So when we first started, there were not very many sort of incubators or accelerators. So the environment in supporting this idea of prototyping and building new services was still pretty non-existent. Employees mostly had a very low risk profile, and there were limited sources for funding. But now, even just in Tokyo, I've calculated over at least 15 incubator type operations. And some of these are individually run, some of these are corporate run incubators. In Japan, it's kind of sexy, it's kind of cool to be doing a startup. And there's even these weekend events where teams get together and try and produce an idea. And since it's been about 5 years now, there have been a couple startups that others, between which employees have sort of moved around, and so there's been a bit more mobility and some more experience in sort of the employee pool. And I think there have been more sort of example startups and a smarter sort of investor pool and much better sort of information exchange between the Bay Area and Japan. So there's, I'm obviously fly between Tokyo and the Bay Area pretty regularly. There's many others who do the same. The incubators out here, like Y Combinator and 500 Startups, provide sort of a short-term period for entrepreneurs in Japan to come out here and experience and see what it's like and expose themselves to this environment before they go back. And so a lot more cross-pollination in that information has been really great for the ecosystem in Tokyo. So this is Shibuya intersection, and sort of my assessment, real sort of back of the napkin assessment, it kind of looks like this. I'm just listing a couple of the incubators, and I guess these slides will be shared so you can check them out a little later. There are a number of promising startups now, and a couple of these have actually moved out here for one reason or another. And if you're interested in learning more about this space, there's some interesting resources that are gathering a lot more information, and these are all in English, and some of them are using Gengo to translate for other languages such as Indonesian and Chinese to reach the Asian sphere. I think there's still some areas of improvement, and this may just be a matter of time. One is exits and mentorship. So we're starting to see some more startups IPOing in Japan. And a couple acquisitions, but not at the volume that you see out here or in some other environments. But I think that's improving. I do believe, in my sort of observation, there's a little bit of a retention issue around the mentors. And so there are a number, I'm not going to mention names or anything, but there are a number of successful Japanese entrepreneurs who have had wonderful exits, and they've ended up moving out here to the Bay Area after exiting in Japan. And I wish they would sort of give back a little bit more to the local, to the Japanese economy and mentor there. Another area of improvement, so need a bit more flexibility in workspaces, particularly temporary workspaces and workplace regulations. So by this I mean if you want to rent a office space in Tokyo, there's still a lot you have to give up. You have to guarantee almost your life if you want to just rent a place. There's a lot of background checking that goes on, and it's a very tedious and basically egregious process. And I think it could be a lot easier. And large organizations don't seem to yet really know how to work with startups. And this probably exists in other places as well, but in Japan, it's pretty challenging, and they might think it's novel, but there's a lot of extra meetings that need to happen. Relationship building is important, but as a startup, you need to have the flexibility to be able to move quickly. And so this has been a challenge for some. And the government is investing more in these funds to help startups. One in particular is tasked with helping startups in Japan go global and go overseas. However, the management of that fund does not speak any English. So it seems kind of odd to me, and it kind of questions how serious they really are about these kinds of efforts. And so potential areas of improvement. This is our San Mateo office. We make every effort to make sure that the distance does not become a barrier for us. We do regular sort of video conferencing and meetings like this. Of course, there's a time zone challenge, but between the West Coast and Tokyo, it's not that bad. And so a couple takeaways, what's sort of helped us grow, just making sure that this separation is not, doesn't hinder us in any way. I think we've been pretty fortunate in getting to know the local reporters of foreign media. So we've had some great coverage and visibility, and I think if you're thinking of doing a startup in an environment where you can build these kinds of relationships, you should take every advantage you can. Also appealing to reporters of local media. Obviously, we're helping Japanese businesses go international, go global, and so we've tried to emphasize on this story. The ecosystem, startup ecosystem in Tokyo, it's pretty tight still, and it's very important to support each other. And so we've done a lot of partnering and working with other local entrepreneurs, either through an event to gather interesting talent for hiring, or just cross-marketing, cross-promotion, and also focused on finding these sort of entrepreneurs, if you will, in enterprise. So this idea of working at a startup, it's becoming more accepted, and there are still some individuals in large corporations who are tempted by it, but are not quite ready to take the plunge. But they want to work with other startups, and so if you can identify that individual in that company, then I think you'll have an easier time working with that large enterprise. So that's basically my story. Thanks for listening. If you want to try out Gengo, if you go to gengo.com/try, you'll get some free credits, and you can follow the company Twitter feed at GengoIt. So thanks.
So Matt, I want to just be clear. Gengo is using only human translators. You don't have machine translation back in the back of this.
That's
somewhere.
correct. Yeah, it's all human.
Okay. And are you still able to be faster than, say, what would come out of?
So our turnaround time.
Because actually, for those of you who don't know, Japan's had commercial machine translation software for
a while.
20 years now. Yeah.
Yeah. So machine translation is always going to be faster. We have managed to reduce our turnaround time to, it depends on the length, but to minutes. And so we have customers who are ordering Twitter feeds and short blog posts, and they'll get it back within.
And that includes from the time they place the order through Gengo until the translation actually comes back.
That's correct. So there's sort of two parts that affect the turnaround time. One is how quickly it gets picked up by a translator, and the other is how quickly they can actually do the translation.
Yeah.
And so that first part you can squeeze to near zero. And so that's one of our focuses. Mm-hmm. And the other part we try and improve through technology and the interface that translators use. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't I open the floor? Questions?
So that's a great story, and it's terrific that you're doing it in Japan. I guess the but that follows is I didn't catch why there would be a business advantage to having it in Japan. You can raise the money in Japan, the problem with the facility and so on. Are there any advantages? Were there advantages from actually doing it in Japan, other than that's where you wanted to do it, and I think it's terrific. But
Cool. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at this point, we sort of say that our headquarters is online. Doesn't really matter where we are. One of the interesting things that we have found with respect to hiring talent is that in Japan, we're able to offer an environment that appeals to individuals outside of Japan and in Japan, but particularly outside Japan, who have really great skills, but that larger companies like a Google or a Facebook cannot offer. Typically, you kind of want to be, at the heart of the company, at the headquarters, right? And so, for the big tech companies, that's out here. But for us, it's actually in Japan, and so we're able to find individuals who, with great engineering backgrounds, interested in working in Japan, and that helps us, being in Japan, sort of a competitive advantage, if you will, in that sense.
Okay.
You have translators all over the world. What is the mechanism you use to pay your translators, and have you run into any issues with national laws regarding, I assume they're independent contractors, but some countries don't permit independent contractors. So how have you encountered that whole environment of regulation of employees and so forth?
Sure, yeah, good question. So there are definitely some countries where we're not allowed to do business, and we make sure that the translators are not working in that country. North Korea, for example, right? We use PayPal, basically, for paying out our translators. And so if translators are able to make an account in a PayPal account, then we just sort of send the funds to them, to their account there. That's basically.
Can I ask a couple more details?
Sure.
Do you basically base it in dollars, or is it the day's exchange rate, or how do you do
Yeah,
this?
so all the translator payments are done in dollars. And so it's kind of up to the onus is on the translator to convert it to their local currency if needed. There are ways that we could improve that experience, of course. And eventually, when our product team, there's always a backlog of development needs to happen, but when we get there.
25,000-person company.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we'll
okay.
address that. But
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Ethan.
So one of the problems you brought up was helping each other more and supporting each other. Where do most Japanese startup founders and employees meet? Is it, in other words, what type of meetups, what type of events draw them and bring them together?
That's a good question. So there are a couple events that are sort of run by popular services that originated outside Japan. So GitHub, for example, has their drink ups, and there are drink ups in Tokyo. And I'm just kind of thinking about Tokyo specifically, just because that's where we're based. I'm sure some of this happens in like Fukuoka or other parts of Japan as well. There's the Hacker News meetups; those happen occasionally. There are sort of development language focused meetups, such as CookPad runs a Ruby meetup because that's their core system language. Other companies like the KDDI Lab, they have an opportunity, I think it's at least once a month, for startup founders to sort of present. And so KDDI provides a space for that kind of event. And so if you go to services like PTix, for example, is like an event service. If you go to like an Eventbrite or something, you'll start to see, and Doorkeeper is another one. It's a very local event service, but they're, I think, companies, and sometimes founders themselves are getting better at, running an evening event to get that community together. Yeah.
So among the people who have an interest in entrepreneurship, are you seeing a lot from university students in Japan?
I do occasionally run into university students. I have not seen, and it could just be me, but I have not seen sort of services built by university students. I do know that one of I think it's Infinity Ventures, which is one of the funds in Tokyo, does run an event just for university students, which I have not attended, but I've heard of. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Great talk. You introduced the concept of omotenashi, the spirit of selfless and hospitality. Basically in Japan, that suite has helped your company service and more how to say great or help your service in advance or my question is omotenashi is that affected your company service.
Has it impacted our service? Absolutely. So we've been all very aware of the level of customer support and service that's just fantastic in Japan, and we try and live up to supporting that, having that kind of service and support for our customers as well. And we have a great customer rep support head who is always thinking about how he can wow customers. It's called the WOW campaign, but basically, if anything ever goes wrong, or if there should ever be a challenge that customers go through, we're always trying to go above and beyond and satisfying them. So it's a core part of our service.
Translate is an experience. So omotenashi has helped translate work and.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because we've seen a number of interesting stories where our translators, they are really passionate about the work that they do, and so oftentimes they'll go above and beyond and do some more research and include that in the translation as they give it back to the customer. So we've seen some cases of content about a historical figure, and the translator will actually do some research and provide some context about that individual, and because oftentimes it might be something that you would not find on Wikipedia in the original, in your target language, for example. So our translators are really passionate about, and because they have the flexibility to choose what jobs they do, they usually pick the ones that are of personal interest to them as well, and so they'll go above and beyond in that context.
One of the weaknesses of omotenashi is it depends on people that you have embedded omotenashi into your system, so it's scalable.
I would say, what we've done is made the process a lot easier and smoother. So there's always in our infrastructure, it is the individual. It is a person who is involved, and so I haven't seen it as an issue.
But let me ask you a follow-up, because I remember in reading some of the materials on the Gengo website, right? You've got a process for spot checking and peer review to make sure that the translation quality is good. It's great to say that it's good on average, but that 1% of things that would be a problem would be a killer if somebody's depending on the translation, right? So tell a little bit about how you check for quality. How do you do that?
Sure. So we have internal tools that the senior translators use to evaluate the content that comes through. And basically, if it's a new translator, each individual translator has to build sort of a reputation or a profile. And so translators who are new to the system get checked more regularly. And as they build up a good reputation, then we don't have to look after them as much. And so that helps us basically scale out.
Do they know how each other's reputation is?
Not currently.
Because that may be one difference between this and, say, the Linux development community, where you have a lot of programmers who are coding, and everybody knows who's really good and who's sort of.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually the direction that we're going in. And we've already seen a number of our translators. I showed you that dashboard where you have the quality and the speed. We have translators who take a screenshot of that and put it on their Facebook. And so they want their community and their connections to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
And so we're just making that process even easier is going to be the next phase for us.
Okay.
Following the same theme, do you purposely try to recruit translators in particular domain expertise in medicine or engineering or biology?
Okay. We have done some targeted recruitment for a certain type of content, but not at that level. So just to be clear, the type of content that we're best at is sort of user-generated content that regular individuals should be able to understand. So the specialist content that you've mentioned, like medical, patents, like really deep tech, we actually partner with agencies that have that kind of expertise. And if we see that content come in, we'll send it off to those agencies. We don't actually do them at the high volume that we would do product descriptions, user reviews, Twitter feeds. So we're seeing a lot of things like Lady Gaga's tweet feed or Justin Bieber's tweet feed. It's like that kind of sort of user-generated content that didn't really exist, 8 to 10 years ago is the bulk of what we translate.
Ian?
I'm just wondering how the relationship between translators and the customers works in terms of how deep is that relationship? Do they have the ability to talk to each other, or is it just that they receive a document and they send off a document? Is there the option for repeat translations from a certain translator if you like the work they've done?
Great question. So the customers and translators do have the ability to have a discourse and communicate, and oftentimes there's some clarification that the translator wants from the customer. But that's kept anonymous, and so we saw earlier on customers ordering love letters and the type of content that you might be a little embarrassed to ask a friend to translate, for example, or someone that you know. And so we maintain anonymity across between customers and translators, but they're able to ask questions and have communication. Yeah.
Bevan?
Curious, since many Japanese government or enterprise try to start this encourage entrepreneurship, since you are a success example, has any of those organizations approached you, use you as an example to show them the ropes?
We have been fortunate enough to be featured in the media. We have some conversations with some of the government funds that I mentioned towards the end, but we have some, we're still trying to figure out how to manage that relationship. So we haven't really been sort of a marquee example yet. And we're still trying to grow the business, and so I think it's still a little bit early for us to say it's a complete success.
Let me ask a kind of delicate question. Because your funding comes from an international group, are you considered a foreign affiliate firm in Japan? What's the status of the company?
So we were founded in Japan, which is a really core piece of our story. If we were not in Japan, we probably would not have had this idea and this need. And so that's the message that's really important, I think, for the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think right now a huge advantage your service has over machine translation is that the accuracy and how natural it sounds like that the translation is. So we know the capacity for algorithm to process large data is increasing exponentially. So let's assume 2 years down the road and machine translation can almost be as accurate as human translation. How would you respond to that impact to your business?
So we see machine translation as more of a complement than sort of a competitor to us. So language is a very living sort of thing or organism, if you will. And so there's always going to be new words, new concepts, new phrases, slang that comes up, and I think there's always going to be an element that humans need to be involved. And so if machine translation, there may be at some point an opportunity for us to provide machine translation as an initial step for a customer, and maybe the customer wants to improve on that copy and somehow and make it more unique. So one of the trends that we've seen is some of the bigger search engines, in particular Google, for example, can identify if content has been machine translated. And so they actually are able to mark pages as, okay, this has been machine translated, so it's less original. And so they sort of reduce the ranking. And so that's why we're starting to see customers that have large volumes of content come to us, because we provide a competitive advantage and some originality to the content. So I'm not, to answer your question, we would sort of provide it as an additional service and potentially improve the speed that our translators would be translating at.
So you've scaled up really quickly. But other than the scale now, what kind of barriers of entry are there to other groups who would want to try to do the same kind of platform?
I think the education piece is really important for us, and the way we communicate with our community.
Back to the omotenashi.
Yeah, and how we sort of nurture and really sort of build a relationship with them. We are about to make a hire for to grow our community management team, and these are positions solely responsible for working with the translator community. And as the group grows, and there may be some specialties and that we start to support, maybe some different languages that are a bit more unique. So it's going to always be important for that community. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's you. Yeah, I'm venture capitalist in Japan. So I have just simple question. So how do you think Japanese VC? So because you say in Japan, so you collect money for the US investor. Yeah.
So how do I see Japanese VCs?
How do you think so Japanese investor or VC?
Well, I mean, I think we actually have some Japanese investors. So NTT Docomo, for example, is an investor who joined the B round. I think they are great for the relationship building and helping operationally and build the business. I think the challenge has been for Japanese VCs to sort of lead around and be very quick about closing. We've had some cases where, well, we've heard of some stories and even went through a small experience where we wanted to close a round and we really liked working with a particular Japanese VC, but it was going to take 3 months before they could make a decision, and we needed to make a decision in a few weeks. And so the relationship was important enough for us that we let them come in after the official closing, but it was I think if they can improve the pace, and I think they're starting to see this pressure internationally as well. I think U.S. VCs are starting to apply some, be more sort of put some more pressure, competitive pressure on the Japanese VCs, as well as money from other parts of Asia, such as Chinese VCs, for example. So, yeah.
One of the things I'm getting from your talk is how fast things have changed, really just since 2008, 2009. If you were to start Gengo or something like Gengo right now, would you have done something different at the very beginning stage? Would you do something very different than you did last time?
Well, there's a lot of variables in that. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think we could have been better in the frequency of our communication with either side. So
with potential investors.
With potential investors, yeah. We in the first year and a half, 2 years, we came to the Bay Area maybe once every 6-7 months or something. If we'd come even every 3 months or something, I think it would have been better for us.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that is still not quite as developed in Japan as it is here. Just the kind of unwritten traditions of investee kind of relationships, for better or worse, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Go ahead.
Doing written translation, have you considered oral translation, and why did you choose written as opposed to oral?
Sure. So, like interpretation, yeah, we in the beginning it's just easier to launch with a text-based platform, and if we do start to support audio or oral-based, it might be through a partnership. I think there are a couple of interesting services out there that are sort of capturing that space. So it's crossed our mind, but it's one of the key things I think in building a startup and building a company in the very beginning is just it may sound cliche, but really just staying focused. And we have had a tendency of building services, additional services, kind of a little too early, before sort of the core product that we were building had really proven itself. And so we ended up shutting those down. And the time and cost we had invested in that could have been applied better. And so that's one of the reasons why we've just stayed focused on the text for a while.
Okay.
Has Prime Minister Abe made a step function difference, and if so, in what way?
I suppose peripherally, but I haven't really sort of experienced it directly. In terms of awareness and appreciation, so one of the challenges in hiring.
You know, he said Japan is back, and he's invested, put a lot of money in play for various groups, organizations, and government.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's more just. From my personal exposure, it's been more just through the visibility and the awareness. And we are now able to use it more when we want to hire local talent. Sometimes it'll be a young individual who says, well, my mom has never heard of your company before, or something like that. And it's just like, okay, we'll have to go talk to parents, and then sort of appeal by stating that, look, the government is getting behind greater entrepreneurship, and this is a good thing, and telling that kind of story. And so, and having those data points that Abe-san has.
Employment of women, which has been another goal. You haven't seen any difference.
Difference in.
Well, he's made a big initiative for the employment of women, which of course in Japan has been a different culture.
So there's a really cool shared office space called Hatch. I think it's Hatch Kids or Hatch, and the individual running that built the space up with a focus on helping women who have kids who want to build their own business. And so there's actually a nursery sort of next to the shared office space. And he's doing a great job on getting a lot of great visibility. And Caroline Kennedy went and visited, and who's the ambassador, of course, to Japan for the U.S. And so there is more of that, but it's Japan, Japanese culture. It's taken some time, but I think it's in the right direction. So
I want to follow up with part of that is in your talk, you talked a lot about the importance of engaging with both foreign media and local media. How do you think the media engagement, because that's not talked about too much when we talk about entrepreneurship. And I do think media engagement probably is one of those things that can be extremely important to a company. How has Gengo benefited from the media?
Sure. We've had opportunities to be on WBS, World Business Satellite, which is a TV show that starts around 11:30 at night. And their focus is on highlighting sort of new businesses in Japan. And I think with some of the messaging that's coming out of the Prime Minister's office and the government, that the media in general are starting to sense like, okay, well, if the government's saying this, like, we're the sources of these startups, these entrepreneurs. And so I'm running into more reporters and individuals from Nikkei Business and NHK and whatnot at some of these events.
But of course, the one thing that doesn't scale is the entrepreneur's time.
Well, yeah.
I mean, do you think that really would you recommend entrepreneurs to pay close attention to developing media relationships? Is it worth the time, or?
I think one way you can do it efficiently is. We did this thing where when we moved into our office, so it's like changes. People like to highlight some improvement or some kind of change. And so when we moved into our new office, we did sort of a press event. And we said, hey, we're Gengo, we're moved into our new office, and it coincided with the latest fundraising. And we invited all the media that we could had connections with, and filled a room of about 30 or so, and it led to some good press and PR. And so if you can sort of concentrate it in sort of phases, then you also can try and create this sort of momentum and help. Yeah, if you just sort of, I mean, you also want to keep a drumbeat, so you do want to do it regularly enough, but not like once a year. That's a little bit, too sparse, I think.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think?
I heard that you think much of stress the importance of video conference between Tokyo and some of the offices. Am I right? Yes. Why do you think much of the communication?
Why is it important?
Yeah, right.
Well, so we're still a pretty small company, and it's important. I mean, culture is a really key part, and as I sort of showed, I hope you got in the photo, like diversity is really important for us, and so to maintain that message, and because we are still small, everyone's sort of role really impacts pretty heavily, even across offices, and our marketing team, even it's a global marketing team, but they do a lot for the Japan market as well, and the individual running that is actually based out of our San Mateo office here. He's a Japanese individual who grew up in America, and so he likes to live out here, but he comes to Japan pretty regularly as well. And then just sort of operationally, a lot of cross-functional activities that require that communication. And there's a lot of things that emails just don't cover that you can do much more quickly and efficiently if you can just speak in person, and if you can see their face even better, right? Instead of just over the phone all the time. So.
Other questions? Oh, there.
Great.
Yeah.
I may have missed it, but how did you come up with the name Gengo? And what does it mean, and how does that relate to translations? 'Cause
Sure,
it's
yeah.
a mystery to me.
Yeah, no, I should have covered this earlier on, right? So Gengo means language in Japanese.
Okay.
We actually started as my Gengo because we couldn't get the domain gengo.com. And so this concept in Japan of sort of adding my before a word is sometimes pretty popular. It's like my bumu, my hashi, like my own kind of thing. And so we figured we'd do my Gengo. And then we had an opportunity to get the actual Gengo.com domain, and so we rebranded and dropped the my, kind of like Facebook dropped the. So.
Do you actually have a copyright, or rather a trademark on the name Gengo then?
Not on the name, just on the branding. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when you raising the seed fund, you must already have some customers and translators. How did you grow to that stage before you have any external money coming in?
Sure, yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, right, in the very beginning. So we focused first on getting just English-Japanese language pair, for which we had a network of bilingual individuals who volunteered to be our sort of original translators. So once we had a pool of 5 to 10 of these translators, then we sort of marketed online and try to get some customers, and that's how it kind of started to grow. Yeah, so we had to use our sort of our friend network, and because we were bilingual ourselves in the very beginning, we could do some of the work, we could sort of see what was being ordered, we could sort of step in and tweak the product if we needed to, because we could function as translators ourselves. Yeah. So dog fooding the platform is really important to us. So actually continuing to use it ourselves is one of the key ways of improving a product. And I think that's really important for startups. I think you have to really be regularly using your own service to understand what the customers are going through to improve it.
So right now, Japan has kind of a bad reputation about not being entrepreneurial. What do you think will change that?
I think it's getting better. I mean, I mentioned some of the improvements, the incubators, the trends. I mean, one of the key areas of improvement, I think, though, is sort of it's very kind of bottom-heavy still. A lot of interest and excitement around building prototypes and building a business and participating in a startup, but not a lot of mentorship. And I'm hoping that some of the very successful individuals can give back more. And I think like Mikitani-san, the founder of Rakuten, has started his own event called Jane, I think it's called, and maybe some more of those events. I think maybe Son-san from SoftBank is going to be doing his own kind of event eventually. So yeah, giving back from the mentorship, I think, would be key.
I think that's a good note for us to call on into the formal session. We've got some things out there. One more question, okay? Go for it.
Who is your competitor?
Who's your competitor?
Competitors, yeah. So there are a number of sort of translation agencies out there, and that you can sort of order online from. There's no one that I really know that's doing the volume that we're doing at, and that has the API as core to their business. So in a way, it's kind of, and there are some translation technology platforms that don't have translators but help translate content, because they have some software that translators use, and then finding the translators is up to the customer or something like that. And so we're finding that a lot of our competition is more just around that mind share, like customers who want to go global, who want to translate stuff. There's a lot of these businesses that are very good in the specific domain, but they see them all the same. So it's kind of a marketing challenge a little bit, and that's one area that we're trying to improve. Yeah.
Okay, let's call an end to the formal session and go out, have some refreshments, and get to talk more informally. Matt, thanks again.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks.